Car Wizard, what is the most reliable gas-powered vehicle in human history? I'm going to show you today. Let's get started. I absolutely love these little Toyota pickup trucks. I've heard so many stories all the way back from when I was in the military to various friends and even family members that live in different areas in the country, and they see these trucks on the road. These things are absolutely bulletproof. We're going to take a look around. It actually just came in today just for one simple issue. The radio quit working. It's an aftermarket radio. We'll show you what we found. It was really easy. But before this vehicle leaves, I wanted to answer that question. What is the most reliable vehicle on planet Earth? It is one of these. This is a 1990 Toyota pickup. In some countries it's called a Hilux. But no, they're not big on towing. They're not big and robust and doing all kinds of crazy heavy hauling and stuff. But for what they do it very well. And it seems like they never, ever break. I got some stories to tell, but first let's take a look around this thing. It's not showroom condition, but it's still in pretty good shape. Here we can see it says Toyota, obviously, and it has the V6 emblem. It does have the 3-liter V6 we'll take a look at. You don't see too many of these in the rearview mirror anymore. Not as many as you used to, but there's still a lot of them on the road. As we go down the side, you can see the paint is starting to fade pretty bad. It doesn't matter, it has tons of life left. It has the regular 14-inch wheels. Remember those, Mrs. Wizard?
That was the nice days of buying tires. They were a lot cheaper, those smaller sizes.
They definitely were. It still has some of the graphics you can see in the paint. You can see the clear coat is pretty much at the end of its life on this truck. This is the long bed version. And it doesn't have any emblems or anything going on back there. Maybe they've come off over the years. It does have 2 little tow balls for towing various things. But overall, it's a good little work truck. So this doesn't need a whole lot with this vehicle. Obviously the paint job is faded and it could be repainted, but it'd be quite expensive. And thinking about cost, I know it costs a lot to fix cars. The cost of parts and shop supplies have really risen in the last couple of years. With all these rising costs, especially with gas, groceries, and eating out, I feel like my wallet is definitely a lot lighter lately. Luckily there's a way you can put money back into your pocket from making the purchases you normally make, and that's with Upside. Upside is a free app that gets you cash back from your everyday purchases. There are over 100,000 gas stations, grocery stores, and restaurants in their network. It's so easy. Download the app, search for offers in your area, claim an offer, pay just as you normally would with your debit or credit card, and follow the easy steps in the app. That's it. It really only takes a few seconds. I've been using it at the gas station just around the corner from the shop. In the short time I've used it, I've already earned over $8. Top Upside earners are making as much as $300 a month. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description below to download Upside and use code CARWIZARD to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon of your first tank of gas. Or scan the QR code here to claim this offer. Now back to this little Toyota. So there's 3 things that could kill these pickups. Number 1 is going to be under the hood. Let's take a look. That would be something to do with the engine or transmission if it were to die. It may not be worth putting a bunch of money into. As you can see, it has the 3-liter V6, which is the 3VZE. Has about 150 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque. They're not power monsters or anything like that, but they're dead reliable. They do the job. And a lot of these trucks actually have the 4 cylinders. This one actually has the V6 for a little extra towing power. But if they're maintained like this one has been, they can last a long time, 3, 4, 500,000 miles, no problem. This one hasn't been modified with crazy engine cold air intakes and all this stuff you buy at your local parts store. It's just been left alone. And I really like to see that. That really is good for longevity. Let's talk about the second thing that kills these trucks. Number 2 is accidents, like getting T-boned. That's not the fault of the truck. There's nothing you can do to do preventative maintenance to keep from getting T-boned. So there's a lot of these that are off the road, not because they couldn't live any longer, but because they literally were totaled in an accident. So that's number 2. Number 3 we'll look at in a minute, but before we jump into that, let's let Mrs. Wizard show you guys around the little interior. It's a very small truck.
There it is. 170,000 miles, 383.1 miles. This thing is barely broke in. Gauge cluster's looking good. I can see we've got a little dust and a few fingerprints, but hey, dust hardly kills anything, and maybe, and if anything, it's a protective layer. Yeah, that's what we'll call it, protective layer. Got a protective layer also on this dash as well. It's looking great. Got a few fingerprints there as well, but again, dust wipes off. And with the age of this truck, it's looking great. You have a simple little cup holder that still works, nice, very low tech, but very functional. Got simple sliders for our HVAC system, and we do have a new Pioneer radio added as well. I can see they're using their ashtray for important items, pens and such. As we look at the floorboard, other than a few personal items, some tissues and, you know, a sack from the grocery store, nothing crazy is going on there. Don't have really overly protective floor mats, but the carpet's still in good condition. There's no holes or anything. Here's what makes this truck awfully fun. Look at that 5-speed manual. Mind you, the Wizard may not appreciate manual transmissions. I do, and they are a blast to drive, and this little guy would be so much fun. So look at our seats. They are cloth seats, have a nice kind of a pattern to them, and it does have the itsy bitsy teeny tiniest little armrest in the center. But this is a bench seat, so this actually could hold 6 people. I wouldn't want to be the 3 people in the back seat, but we'll look at that in a moment. And here we are at the door card, and everything in here is kind of a blue, a dusty blue, and that was very popular in the early 90s. You can see that it does have manual windows, which definitely makes it easier to control those windows and less things to break. The back seat is being used, what most people would probably use their back seat to a truck like this, is to hold stuff. Yeah, we got some work gloves, got a little bit of a blanket, got some other stuff in here, but yeah, it could hold people, and I would not want to be the people back there because it is awfully small and really no headrest as well. So gosh, if you're in an accident, that would not be a good thing to be in right there. No, no. Headliner's in really good condition, and I like how the back section has a little bit, maybe a 1.5 inch area that's a little bit higher, so I guess it gives them a little more headroom, I guess. But no rips, no tears, no marks, nothing going on. And we're back to our steering wheel, and there's no buttons on here. We just have horn button, Toyota, the word, don't even have the symbol. The only thing that has been changed or altered is back here, aftermarket cruise control, which that would probably be nice and handy, especially if you're taking this on road trips. So that is it. Nothing fancy, nothing fabulous in here, but does it all work? Yep. Is it all functional? You bet. Now I'm really curious, what is that third thing that really could hurt this truck? Let's get this up on a lift.
The third thing that can kill these trucks, which is taken out, there's certain year ranges of the Tacomas and things, is rust on the frame. I don't know that it was in these earlier trucks, but it was definitely something that could take out any of these trucks is rust, bad rust, especially if you live in the Northeast with lots of salt on the road during the winter and things. It doesn't matter how tough your truck is, it can destroy it. Let's take a look at this one. So here's our little bottom fan shroud slash shield here, and it's nice and dry. There's nothing leaking out of it. Take a look from the back side. And nothing going on there. Fan looks good, no leaks. The radiator has not been punctured or anything. We do have a little seepage here. It's probably just from oil changes or whatever. It looks like it's coming from this bolt. We didn't do an oil change on it. We weren't asked to, so that's probably something that's tied with that. Nothing really needs to be done about it, just cleaned off, and we might clean it off before it leaves. Here's our manual transmission. Everything looks good on it. No fluids leaking out. Let's take a look at these front brakes. The pads still have some life in them. The rotors are getting kind of thin, I can tell. So at some point those will need to be replaced, probably on the next set of pads. The shocks are not blown. Nothing's loose. And our sway bar link is good. Some of you guys like to catch me on things I might miss. I didn't miss the fact that I can tell it's been maintained because all the grease zerks have been greased. Take a look. See kind of a bluish fluid there that's been greased. Up here as well, it's been greased. Some of it's pooched out a little bit. Same thing's going on. There's some grease that dripped from being serviced up above, probably from here. Brakes over here, similar situation as the other side. Sway bar link is good. Nothing's loose, and the shock is nice and dry. This little truck is not a 4x4, it's only a rear-wheel drive, so you won't see a transfer case or anything here. We do see the transmission mount is still good, but it's a little collapsed. Still has a lot of life left in it. There's a tiny bit of seepage coming from that speedometer cable. It's nothing worth tearing it apart for. It's not even dripping or anything. We'll check out our drive shaft. Everything is nice and tight. There's a bug, Mrs. Wizard.
Ew. I'm glad he's dead because I think he's got a, bit of a sting to him.
Looks like an old wasp or something. But yeah, you can see here it's been greased again. This has torsion bar springs in the front, not coil springs. Here's the cable to our parking brake, and luckily everything is intact and not rusted or broken. Here's our carrier bearing. Everything looks good there. There's a little bit of rust here on the shield, but as you can look at the frame, other than surface rust, there's really nothing serious going on or nothing dangerous. So that's really good that it's not having some corrosion issues. Here's our stock muffler. Again, it's not been modified or messed with or put any kind of strange exhaust on it. It's just stock. Here's our tiny little Toyota rear axle. Shock is not blown out. The drum brakes are not leaking anything from the bottom, so that's good. Over here, same story. The shock is not blown out. I don't see any fluid coming out of the brakes, so that's good. And we can see the bottom of the truck bed. It's also not all rusted out or rotten or anything. Really in pretty good shape. I'm impressed. So here's our rear differential. Unlike the Chevys of this era, which require the entire differential cover to come off just to do a service, this one has a fill plug and a drain plug. That's the way it should be. We do have a little rod here that goes up to a little valve. It's for the braking system. That's what that does. Our spare has plenty of air in it. And again, we're looking at the bumper back here. It's not all rusted and rotten. This is a very good little truck. So this truck is a 1990. It's got a lot of years on it. Let's make sure the tires aren't equally as old. Looks like 16th week of 2022. So they're only a couple years old. So we're good to go on the tires. Let's get this thing on the ground. So I have three little stories or instances I'll share with you that proves that these things are just the best vehicle you can buy in the world for reliability. All Toyota trucks are really good, but these older ones, late 80s, early 90s, these little Toyota trucks are so good. One story I'll share is when I was in the military, I had a friend named Jeff who was from Kentucky. He said growing up as a kid, he would go hunting, he would go hang out with friends or go various places throughout the state. He said these little trucks are everywhere. Because he said when you get out in the holler, that's what he called it, way out in the middle of nowhere, literally 30 miles from home. He said this is the one that they rely on, that they know they will get back home. It's not going to break on them. He said they beat these things to death and they refused to die. One time they even ran one of them out of oil and locked up the motor. They put fresh oil in it, got it to free up, and it lasted another 5 years after that. They really are great trucks. The second story I'll give you is actually Mrs. Wizard's dad, who said the same kind of a story, except in Tennessee. He said when you go out into the woods, and you go camping or you go hiking or anything, everywhere you look, these older Toyotas are driving by this way, that way. They're everywhere. He told me, he said, you go down there, you don't see Jeeps, you don't see Subarus, you see these around every corner. The third story I'm going to give you is actually if you go to any other of the countries in the world, especially smaller countries, it could be Africa, it could be Australia, especially Australia. These things are all over the world, in places where there is no time or no room for failure. I actually had a friend named Joel who went to be a missionary in Africa, in Cameroon. And they weren't called pickups or whatever, they were called Hiluxes over there. And he said, every town he came to was Hilux, 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 Hilux. There's a reason. They don't have time for breakdowns or money for them because they just need it to drive. Also in Australia, there's places out there that are literally 200 miles from town. Some of those large ranches out in the outback. They're not driving Chevy pickups. They're not driving Ford Power Strokes. They're driving these, albeit a 4x4. They can get in the truck, they know it's going to start, it's going to get to town, it's going to get back every single day. These are the best, most reliable vehicle on planet Earth. Why was it here? The radio quit working. It's an aftermarket Pioneer stereo, it's very old. Daniel's son pulled it out of the dash and checked it out. It had power, ground, everything's working just fine. There's actually an internal fuse on the back of the radio that had blown. We put a new fuse in, it works fine. It may be just the electronics inside are pulling too much power, or maybe they had it turned up really loud. It is an old radio. We're going to tell the customer if it happens again, it might be time to look for a new radio. Something internally is pulling too much power. But otherwise, it works perfectly fine. We don't need to make a giant bill on it. It'll be out the door for $100 or less. We did have to pull the dash apart to get to the radio and pull it all out, but it really wasn't an expensive fix. This thing is back on the road. And those same three things I just mentioned is why this is still on the road today. It hasn't been hit. It hasn't rusted out. It hasn't had a powertrain failure that to cause it to be not worth fixing. And I have one last small story before we go. When I was a kid, probably 10 or 11, my grandpa had one of these. All his life he had American cars, Chevy trucks, Ford trucks, whatever. I asked him one day, I said, "Why'd you buy a little Toyota, Grandpa?" He says, "Because I'm getting old in age and I just absolutely don't have time for breakdowns." He said, I need something that can haul, not heavy stuff, but pull a small boat, a small load or something like that. And it was it fit the bill perfectly. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to fix the radio on this or any other car in the shop, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut if you purchase anything. We really appreciate it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button here because there's many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.